Chapter 6. The Monster. Bo sighed and turned her attention to the big hotel. There were delicious food smells coming from the kitchen. She sat behind the garbage cans and waited. It wasn't long before the back door opened. A man came out and dumped a large sack on top of the cans, then turned and walked back inside. Bo darted after him across the yard and stumbled up the steps. Darted means she moved very fast. She meowed in her friendliest and most polite voice. Then she received the shock of her life. Lying just inside the door was a huge monster. It looked up in surprise, prickled its ears, and began to growl. Urgh. The fur on Bo's neck stood on end, and she hissed and arched her back. The monster's lips curled back over sharp, pointed teeth, and it slowly got to its feet. Make a picture in your head. What does that look like? Bo stepped back, forgetting that the stairs were just behind her. She lost her footing and went rolling and tumbling down them, giving a yowl of fear. Barking, snarling, and snapping, the monster hurled himself at the little cat. She lashed out instinctively with unfurled claws, raking the creature's face. Now, first graders, think in your head, what is that monster that she's talking about? What is that? It yelped in pain. She raced off down the street with the animal close behind her. They dodged and weaved their way between startled, yelling people and cars, buses and bicycles that made angry, blasting sounds. It was a miracle that someone didn't have an accident. Bo had no idea where to go. All she knew was that she had to run as fast as possible from the terrible creature who was getting closer and closer with every step. She saw a high wall and flung herself at it. Normally, Bo would have been able to manage such a climb, but fear gave her special strength, and she clambered and clawed her way up above the dreadful snapping teeth of the animal below. She stood at the top looking down, breathless, wide-eyed, and trembling from her head to her paws. The dog just could not reach her. Time and again he hurled himself at the wall. He whined and scratched and jumped and barked until he was hoarse and red-eyed and exhausted. All afternoon, Bo waited for him to go away. The dog waited too, until suddenly it began to rain, large splashing drops. The dog looked up at the sky, shook himself, and sneezed. After one or two last futile lunges, he turned and ran back towards the hotel, his ears down and his tail between his legs. Bo watched until he was out of sight. He was dazed, and she, too, was wet. Now what to do, she wondered. I can't go back to the hotel, that's for sure. She jumped with difficulty from the wall, every part of her body feeling stiff and bruised. By now it was raining hard, and the streets were almost empty. It would soon be nightfall again. A strong smell of fish came on the wind and tickled Bo's nose. She began to walk towards the enticing aroma, keeping a sharp lookout for any other monsters that might cross her path. She turned a corner and then stopped in amazement. Across the road, beyond piles of nests and crates and chains and coils of rope, was an enormous body of water. It was gray with white-capped, curling waves that dashed into a pebbly ground. Many big floating houses were sitting in the water. rocking from side to side. First graders, think in your head. Are houses in water? What was she thinking about? What's rocking side to side in the water? Bo suddenly realized that she was looking at the sea. It was exactly as Papa had described it, just like some big fish pond. It seemed to go on forever. The smell of fish was everywhere, though she could not see a single one. She huddled close to some nests, for there was no shelter. She shivered and wished with all her being that she were home with Mama and Princess. And that is the end of chapter 6.